The most important thing that you can do is to reach out to someone who is already part of the organization, find out what their experience was like, what their experience is now, and that way you'll have a little bit more comfortable approach to making your decision.
Welcome to Community Conversations, a podcast for general practitioners and specialists at dental practices who are focused on growing the practice of implantology. In each episode, we cover trends and advancements in implantology, the challenges facing practitioners, and share experiences from MODIS Dental Partners' multidisciplinary practices. Ultimately, you will gain insight into your growing practice. Let's get started.
Hey, David, very nice to meet you.
Nice to see you, Pete.
Yeah. So, David, you are one of our founding partners at MODIS, and I'm really excited to have you on our podcast. I mentioned this to you earlier, but this is a way that some of our sellers have gotten to know our community. And so I'm so excited to have you on and just talk about life.
Well, happy to be part of it.
Yeah. So let's start with something easy. I know that you are a passionate hunter. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about your favorite places to go hunting and how you got into it? At what age, when did this become a passion of your life?
Well, believe it or not, it started out at a very early age. My father and grandfather and uncle would take myself and a couple of my brothers all in the cab of a 65 F-150, and we would drive 45 minutes to get to the state forest, and then they would dump us out to the back of the cab while we were on the clay roads. And we grew up quail hunting. Now, those early years, we just observed. And then when we turned 12, we were able to get a shotgun and get involved in actually shooting the birds. And then I got involved in high school sports. And so I kind of didn't really hunt for the longest time. And then I was in school, and then I had kids. And they started playing on travel soccer teams. So I just got back into it probably 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so we take an annual trip to South Dakota for pheasant hunting. And then we've got another hunting camp just south of Memphis in Tunica, Mississippi, and it's duck and turkey and deer. So we typically...
What month do you go pheasant hunting in North Dakota? What month do you go?
South Dakota November. Usually the first or second weekend in November.
Got it.
And the weather's a crapshoot. You could be hunting in shirt sleeves one year, and then the next year it's -7. So it's you got to pack for everything.
Yeah. Now, what got you into hunting, and is that still the same reason why you enjoy doing it? I mean, I've heard people say all different kinds of things. It reminds them of family. Some people just love being outdoors. They love nature. What is it for you?
So a lot of it does remind me of family and all the memories that I have hunting with my dad. And now I'm making those memories with my son and son-in-law and nephews. So there's just so much to it. There's the dog work. There's the calling. There's the decoy layout. And, getting to shoot a bird is the icing on the cake. But if you don't ever even get to shoot, it's still a good time.
Yeah. It's like surfing for me. If I go out in the water and I watch the sunrise over the horizon, that's the part that I love. Doing it next to my family, talking to my son or my uncle when I was a kid growing up. Catching the waves is the icing on the cake.
Yeah, it can be a religious experience. I mean, it really can.
Yeah. So you talk about family. I'd love to hear. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, what it was like, where you grew up.
So I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, where I practiced. And pretty conventional, average family back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I had two brothers behind me and then a sister. And my mom and dad both worked. My dad worked 2 jobs. They wanted to send us to private school. Wow. And so we had chores at an early age and learned the value of working hard. And because we had the bird dogs, one of us was responsible for letting them out in the morning and cleaning out the pen. And one of us responsible for feeding them. Yeah. And then one of us responsible for policing the yard and picking up the dog piles. So, and we switched every week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we learned, a strong work ethic fairly early on. And then, we participated in youth sports all the way up through high school. And I started working at Chick-fil-A when I was 15 and worked for 2 or 3 years. And then, picked up another job in the mall after that. So I've always worked. Even when I was 12, I was mowing yards. So I think that has a lot to do with who I am and how I have been successful and what I've been able to do.
Mm-hmm. You said your dad picked up 2 jobs so that he could put you all through private school.
Yeah. So he had a job at a chemical plant during the day, and then he sold AAA at night.
Wow.
And then when I was in college, he finally started his own company and things took off for him.
Yeah. Huh. So you had that example as well in your life.
Yes.
You were working, you had your dad as an example.
Absolutely.
Of really sacrificing a lot, it sounds like, to create opportunities for you all.
Yeah.
It's a pretty common experience, actually, from a lot of the members in our community. Their family with tremendous work ethic. If you hear Dr. Picos, he'll tell you that his father was a carpenter and a perfectionist at that as well, and worked. I don't think I'm making it up when he said that both his father and his grandfather, he remembers them leaving the house 4 a.m. and coming back at 9 o'clock.
Wow.
And that was the life. That was kind of what he came into as well. So it's always interesting to hear about how those formative years really make an impression on you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And shape the person you become. I mean, I know both of you all, and both tremendous workers, and just put years and years of blood, sweat, and tears into the profession to become the experts that you are and really build wonderful businesses as well. So, and also, by the way, the lawn mowing, that also happened to be one of my side jobs growing up as a as a kid. I actually found it became more lucrative than working an hourly job.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I got it down to where I could mow a yard in about an hour, and I was getting $25 a yard.
So you'll appreciate this story. I started cutting grass probably around 12 as well, and I cut all the way through high school. And then when I went to college, I couldn't have a job because West Point was the job.
Right.
When I started picking up enough business that it became a real job in the summertime, I loved the fact that I could set my own schedule and I could work 3 straight days and make more money than any of my friends could make in a week.
Right.
But I would pull the starter on that lawnmower at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Just late enough that the neighbors wouldn't complain. and my mom used to complain. I've learned a bit more about, I didn't get the perfectionist strain that Dr. Picos got. I was more of the let's get the work done kind of guy. But my mom says that she remembers seeing me running in the backyard with the lawnmower. So growing up, who would you say your biggest influences were?
Probably had to be my dad for sure.
Yeah.
And my uncles. My dad went into business with my 2 uncles, and they really were a big influence on me.
Now, did they work?
Became interested in dentistry because my mom's cousin was our family dentist, and he was such a jovial guy and always really, really fun to be around, and calmed your fears. And I really, really felt like that was my calling after seeing him and the way he treated all of us.
Yeah. Well, you bring that into the practice as well.
Yeah, I guess so.
Now, what type of business do your dad and brothers run?
My uncle lives in D.C. and he was a sod farmer.
Okay.
And he was very successful at it. And my dad just wanted to do something where he worked for himself.
Yeah.
He was tired of working for somebody else.
Sure.
And so the three of them were going to go into sod farming in Florida.
Yep.
And they went to a trade show at the University of Florida. And this is right when the commercial fertilizers were being introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Probably you'll know of some of the players like True Green and things like that. So there were no businesses like that in our area.
Yeah.
So he thought the turnaround time on getting a return on their investment would occur quicker because he would get paid right away, as opposed to having to wait for the growing season to be over and then harvesting the sod and then having to seed. So he bought a big truck with a tank on it, and he went around and sold his service of fertilizing and weed control and that type of thing. Yeah. So he started off, he was the sole employee and built up to 50-something employees. And my brothers all work in the business now.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not realize it was that big. So today, size?
It's smaller now. It's probably 20 to 30.
Got it.
They have a hard time finding employees.
Yeah, that seems to be a common phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So grass truly is in your family.
That's right. That's right.
That's great. And so when you saw your father operating his own business, did you have any entrepreneurial bug in you, or did the business side just come along with being a dentist?
I think the business side just came along with being a dentist.
Yeah.
Because I started out in the military, like you, I didn't really have any exposure to the business aspect of dentistry until I got out and went out on my own. Kind of had to learn it by trial and error. But, I would lean on him for advice for a lot of things that related to running a business. So,
yeah, that makes sense. So I think we're going to get to the Navy here shortly. Choice of university. I already heard that you had the seed planted in your head that you might want to be a dentist.
Yes.
And this sounds like it happened before you went into college.
Yes. And I had always wanted to go to Auburn University.
Yeah.
But I felt like I'd have an easier time getting into a state-sponsored dental school when I was a resident of that state. So I decided to go to University of Florida instead of Auburn. As it turned out, I didn't get into University of Florida, but I got into Emory. So it was still in the South.
Wow. Hey, I'm surprised. I would have thought Emory would have been more difficult to get into than University of Florida.
Yeah. Well, I guess because it's a private school, it's a little bit more expensive than public school.
So you went to Emory with
Emory, and then felt really, really strongly about specializing in periodontics.
Yep.
But I wasn't 100% sure. And so I felt like the best way to find out would be to try to go to a general practice residency.
Yeah.
And so I had an uncle who had been an endodontist in the Navy, and he had gone through and done a general practice residency. And he says the advantage that the military programs have is all of the mentors for each specialty are board certified. Whereas if you go to some of the civilian hospital trained programs, that they're not. So
I see.
I went ahead and picked up a commission and then was assigned to Naval Hospital San Diego. So
not a bad place.
Was not a bad place to be. But it was a great experience there at the hospital, and we loved living in San Diego and enjoying everything that Southern California has to offer.
Yeah.
And then after my residency, I was assigned to a naval amphibious ship that carries Marines to different ports. Mm-hmm. And so we had, 500 ship's crew, but when we took the Marines on board, we grew to 2,500 to 3,000. So there was a 6-month deployment where we went to the Western Pacific, multiple different countries, and ran exercises. And between the different deployments, then you're doing your workups. So
I see. But
luckily, it was not like being on an aircraft carrier where you're gone for a month or two at a time doing the workups. We would be gone Monday through Friday and spend the weekend at home. So it was nice, very nice.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
I really enjoyed being on the ship and being able to experience what Navy life is really like.
Yes. And this is pre-periodontal.
Yes.
Okay.
So once I finished my tour on the ship, I was stationed back in Pensacola. Mm-hmm. My wife and I were both homesick. And so I told the detailing agent officer, you can send me to Pensacola still in the Navy, or you can send me to Pensacola out of the Navy. Either way, you're going to pay for it. But if you can find me a spot at one of the facilities in Pensacola, I'll stay in. So they were able to find us a spot. We worked 2 years here and then picked up the Perio residency in Kansas City and was there for 2 years. And then luckily somehow got back to Pensacola.
That is lucky. That is lucky. So David, before we get too far, I think somewhere around Emory and San Diego, you changed from talking about just me and I heard we. So what about your lovely bride? How did you meet? When did you all marry?
Now, we actually met working at the mall, believe it or not.
This isn't Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, well, I was at Chick-fil-A. She was at a shoe store.
I gotcha.
She would come get lunch and dinner from Chick-fil-A.
You get in trouble for giving her free sandwiches? You can tell me now.
And so then we ended up having some classes together our freshman year, started hanging out a little bit, and started dating our senior year of college. So, and then we got married in dental school, and she was a physical therapist, so she worked at a couple different hospitals in Atlanta. And then we moved to San Diego, and my son was born the second year we were there. And so she did part-time physical therapy until they were big enough to go to school and that type of thing.
Then it was San Diego, Pensacola, Kansas, back to Pensacola.
Yep.
So all in, David, how many years was that in the Navy? So
we moved 5 times in 9 years.
Sounds about right.
You're used to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 5 times in 9 years. Yeah, that sounds about right. What do you think, looking back on it, what are you most grateful for from your experience in the Navy?
You know, I had a really, really great opportunity to be exposed to a lot of really great clinicians.
Yeah.
And working alongside them, I got to be exposed to a lot of very, very dedicated men and women that worked in the dental field that sacrifice a lot, and they don't get the acknowledgement that they deserve.
Right.
And that can be true all across the board, every branch of the service. So I really enjoyed my time in the Navy. And there were a number of contributing factors that led to our decision to leave the military, one of which was my in-laws both had dementia at the same time. And my wife was kind of the sole caregiver.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the strongest influence. But another reason is we had 2 kids at that point. And when I grew up, I had a great relationship with my expanded family. So not just my siblings, my first cousins.
Right.
We spent every weekend on the water or camping.
Yeah.
We were always together. And
Yeah.
so we had and still have great relationships with my first cousins. And I wanted my kids to have that opportunity to grow up with their first cousins.
Yeah.
And so as it turned out, as we were leaving for Kansas City, my parents bought a house on the water. And so when we got back, every weekend was spent at that house. We couldn't wait to get off work on Friday so we could drive the whole family down to the house on the water and enjoy our time with our family.
Now, when you came back from Kansas City to Pensacola, did you kind of know at that point that that was gonna be your last tour?
I felt like, for the most part,
had 2 kids already.
Yeah. And I knew a lot of families that had kids that did very well with the constant moving to different schools and having to make new friends and form new relationships. But I also knew several whose kids struggled with that. Yeah. And so that was another reason that we felt like we should pull chocks and set up house in Pensacola.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your story means a lot to me. I think I've told you my dad was 39 years in the Army. He was an Army doc.
Right.
And he had a unique arrangement. I mean, he was at Walter Reed. He spent 37 or 36 and a half years of 39 at Walter Reed. He came in at a time where they were trying to build the gastroenterology program. And so the chief of the clinic kind of committed to a handful of the team members that if you stay in the military, I'll keep you here and we'll build kind of an academic program as well. But I hear what you're saying about family. You know, my time in service was very different than my dad's.
Right.
I was in for 5 years, and during that 5 years, I training at Fort Benning, first duty station Korea, second duty station 3rd Ranger Battalion, and in those 3 years deployed 4 times.
Wow.
And I remember my platoon sergeant was a Somalia vet. I mean, he was a hard man and he was a war hero. And we came back from our first deployment together, and his son at the time was 5 years old. And when we came back, his son told him he hated him. He didn't know what he was saying.
Yeah.
I've only seen the guy cry twice in my life. One was when we lost a soldier, and the other time was when his son said he hated him. Mm. And that's hard.
That's rough.
And that was, for me, that was the time I was married and I knew we were going to have a family. And similar to you, I decided that wasn't the life that I wanted for my family.
Right. Right.
Now, David, we did go around and move a bunch afterwards. So it wasn't, I didn't have it all figured out, but I think I landed in a similar place as you. So you transition out of the Navy. You're in Pensacola.
Right.
What do you do next?
So at the time, there were 3 periodontists in our area, one of which had just recently, within the last year or so, picked up an associate. Yeah. So I went to the other 2 and told them, I was planning on practicing in Pensacola. Did they have room for an associate? And neither one of them seemed very interested. And so I said, well, then I'll start on my own. And so my uncle, who was the endodontist, had built a new office building here, and he had only finished out one side of his building. And so I think he kind of was waiting to see what I was going to do. And so he finished out the other half for me. It had, I mean, it had 4 operatories, but when I started, I had 1 chair. And, you know, I went to multiple lunches and dinners every day just to try to meet people.
Right.
Kind of tell them a little bit about myself and my history and get to know them and build a relationship with them. And, you know, luckily we started getting referrals and we ended up moving to our present location. That was 96.
Okay.
No, 94. And we moved to our current location in the year 2000.
Got it.
So
talk to me about that first day. That sounds terrifying.
Well, it was, except that I had a bunch of terminal leave built up. So instead of taking it all when I got out in one big chunk, I started taking Wednesday and Fridays off every week the last 6 months that I was in the military. And so it was a slow transition so that hopefully by the time I was working there 4.5 days a week, there was a patient load.
So you were taking Wednesday and Fridays off. You already had the 4 ops, single chair, other half of the uncle's office.
Actually, I was working in his half because the other half wasn't finished yet.
Got it.
So he didn't work Wednesday and he didn't work Fridays.
I see.
And so I was working out of his operatories during that first 6 months.
And were you utilizing his team members?
I was. There was an assistant that I worked with who ended up coming in and going to hygiene school and being a hygienist for me. And then I used his front desk people to do the billing and, you know, all that kind of stuff until we moved into my half of the building. And then we hired some staff.
Now, who was working at the practice then when you moved to your half? And how many people did you have on your team?
I had 3.
Okay.
No, I had 2. I had an assistant and I had Judy, my current office manager.
What was Judy doing for you then?
Everything.
What is she doing for you now?
Everything.
Exactly. So nothing's changed. It's good.
Right. She just has a little bit more support now.
Yeah. Well, she's a keeper. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you started off 2 people, one of which is your current practice manager, Judy. And that was 1994.
Yeah. And then we slowly started to add hygiene because initially I was doing all the hygiene treatment.
Yeah.
We picked up another assistant so we could work out of more than one room. And then finally, the parking was not very good at the first facility. So as we saw ourselves growing, we saw that we were going to run into a problem. And so that's when we decided to look for other opportunities to build a new office. And as it happened, I had a good childhood friend of mine who was a general dentist here. We would spend the night at each other's house when we were in first grade. And we just stayed friends. And he and I talked about doing a project together. And there was a beautiful piece of property close to my neighborhood that I would drive by every day going to my original office. It had beautiful big oak trees. And so I sat him down one day and said, hey, what do you think about building offices next to each other? Because we were working a lot together. And so we thought that would facilitate working more cohesively if we were right next to each other. If I needed to pop over in his office to see a patient real quick, could do that. Or if I needed him to come across and see a patient. So that was extremely exciting for us to have the opportunity to be able to do that. And so we had the same builder, the same colored brick. And so it worked out really well.
And is he still in the office?
He is not. He sold his practice to a young man that was his associate for a while. And he actually went to go work for the Army. He wanted to travel. So
really,
he was doing contract work for the different Army bases.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
My dad's doing that.
Is he
Except he's
really?
working. Well, I mean, my dad's doing that, but he's working in the exact same hospital that he worked at for 37 years. So he did it because he didn't want to change.
Yeah.
Okay. So built a new practice, 2000, kind of did it with a friend in some ways, which is great. What would you say as your practice has grown over time? How would you define your practice's culture? Do you have any guiding principles for leading, caring for patients, all of the above, really? I'm interested to know.
So we, in addition to trying to provide exceptional care to our patients, we want it to be an extremely good experience when they're here. We want it to be like going to a fine restaurant.
Yep.
You want a great product, but you want to have a great experience while you're there. Yeah. And we try to relay that to the patients and to our referring docs. And we started a Seattle Study Club affiliate here in our area. And so we would bring in different speakers to lecture to the members of the study club so that we could grow together and try to provide optimum treatment for our patients. So I think you just have to constantly work on your relationships with your patients, with your staff, and with your referring dentist.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, share with me a little bit about your team.
So I have several individuals who have been with me for 20 years or more. Mm-hmm. I have several who have been with me for 10 to 15 years. And for the longest time, we had a lot of stability in our staff. And ever since COVID, there's been some changes there. Some of our girls didn't want to come back. Had small kids. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a little bit of a shuffling, but they're great. They work hard for each other. They work hard for me, and they work hard for their patients. So it's really fun atmosphere here. We're like a big family, and we look out for each other, and we pick up for each other when somebody's down. And it's just great to work with a team like that.
And, my experience when I had the chance to come down and welcome the team to MODIS was very much that. You could see the family atmosphere. You could see that people were joking with each other. You could see how much they cared about you, Doc. And really, even in their questions, they were questions about, are we going to be okay?
Right.
And it was very clear.
They had questions making sure I was going to be okay.
That's right. Yeah. Wanted to make sure that you were taken care of.
Yeah.
It was very obvious to me that they cared and they really viewed you and each other as family members. And I think you've had a chance to interact with at least some of the MODIS team and also our other partners. And that is a common thread that runs through every single one of the practices that we've partnered with. This deep sense of family and responsibility to each other, love for each other, and for the doc as well. I mean, it's very clear. There's often tears, and so it was good to be a part of. So what motivates you?
Seeing my patients being taken care of.
Yeah.
Seeing my staff work hard for each other.
Yeah.
And what really motivates me is my family,
Right.
Being able to provide for them, being able to nurture them and watch them grow into these incredible young adults. So I just really enjoy watching the staff grow, my kids grow, the practice grow. That's what motivates me.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm at a different stage in life as a father than you. I think you just celebrated a wedding.
We did. My son, who's I thought was going to be the longest bachelor I'd ever met, but he got married at 37. And so he and his wife moved back to Pensacola.
Yeah.
So I have both of my kids here and my grandkids here. So we get together every week, sometimes more than once, have dinner together. My wife babysits our granddaughters quite a bit. So it's just fun being around them. You know, you have a different relationship with your kids when they're adults than you did when they're little. And so they're more like your best friend, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was fortunate. I have a great relationship with my parents. I always have. And I don't know exactly when it happened, but over time we talk to each other more as friends than as, father son. That's not to say that I don't still treat him like my dad. But I've seen that happen over time. And I say it's even funnier because I have a list of goals that I'd love to see through in my lifetime. And the first one I have for my kids is that they would seek me out as someone that they trust.
Sure.
And that we would grow to become friends. And it helps. I find that it helps me. I've got a 13, 12, and 10-year-old on the days where, 100% sleeves rolled up, being a parent about some laundry list of disciplinary infractions. And I tell my wife, I said, we just have to continue to remind ourselves that we're playing this for the long game.
Right.
And that dirty room, or the fork that I asked my son to wash in the sink for the 4th time, we won't really ever care about that in the next 20 years. It's a good reminder, though, and I appreciate hearing you say it as a man having been afforded the opportunity to look back and see the blessing of having 2 grown kids live within driving distance that still choose to come see you.
Right.
And you get to be a part of not just their lives, but your grandchildren's lives as well. It's kind of hard now, Doc, to pivot back to dentistry, but I'm going to try. So do you mind sharing with me some of your biggest challenges as you try to grow the practice?
So I think probably the biggest challenge is when you come in to an area and you're not already in an established practice.
Yeah.
Is convincing people that you're different.
Yep.
And you're going to treat their patients differently.
Yep.
And so it takes a while to develop that. And even now, luckily, when a new associate goes into a general dentist practice, they typically, initially anyway, will follow the normal referral pattern of the senior dentist. But you still have to take the time to get to know the young associate and let him know or her know why things are different in your practice and how their patients are going to be treated in your practice. Yeah. So that referral pattern maintains itself.
Right. So, right. And do you find that it's equally important how you follow through on the back end of a procedure with those referring doctors?
Oh, absolutely. Especially when it comes to implant therapy, where we're working together as a surgeon and a restorative doc. We got to have great communication, and we got to see the same picture from the very beginning before we jump in and get started. So it takes a lot of, corresponding back and forth and communicating back and forth, and making sure you know what they're wanting from you.
Yeah.
And so, same philosophy with the patients. You want to be able to exceed your referring dentist's expectations, not just meet them. So,
Yep. Anything
and
unique to the time and place that we're currently in terms of leading, operating a practice? You kind of mentioned that COVID made it challenging to keep team members for the first time ever.
yeah,
Anything else that you've found kind of unique to the time and place that we're in? It could be anything, really. I've heard people talk about social media.
well, I think that there are more individuals that are getting involved with procedures that historically were not performed at a general dentist office.
Yep.
And so, you just have to be there to provide support. If they have questions,
Yeah.
be happy to answer their questions, and don't be upset that you're not getting the referral,
Sure.
because obviously there's going to be a case where they feel uncomfortable with, and they'll refer those cases. So
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting phenomenon that's going on. I think the face of dentistry is changing quite a bit as far as scope of therapy. And so it'll just be interesting to see where it is 5 to 10 years from now. So.
Yeah. Yeah. We have, we have some general practitioners in the
Right.
MODIS community
Right.
that are prolific
Right.
in
And
placing
so,
implants.
and I have a niece that's just started her perio program at Florida. And when she was thinking about whether she wanted to pursue a specialty, I said, look, you just need to figure out what it is you think you want to do. You don't need another degree to be able to do that in your practice.
Yeah.
You just need to get the proper training.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of these people have gotten an extensive amount of training.
Sure.
I see a lot of good general practitioners at Dr. Picos's courses at his institute. And so I think that's the most important part if you're going to get involved with it.
Yep. That's right. So if you were to give advice to anyone that was in a place trying to build their practice up, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that word of mouth is the best advertising that you can get. And unfortunately, with all the social media, the Google reviews are important because that's how our patients find their clinicians today.
That's right.
They look at the Google review. And so that will at least get your patients in the door. And then you've got to, meet their expectations or exceed them to keep them in there. But I think that's social media is driving a lot of where patients decide to get their health care.
A little scary.
Yeah.
But it is the way of the world, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. And something we're quite focused on is how to help our partners really optimize their presence in the local market. And in some cases beyond the local market, to the extent that they have traveling patients. You said it right. It is the way of the world. And it's important that to be successful in today's day and age, you, as a business owner, you're maximizing that opportunity, and to never lose sight of the fact that to keep a patient, you have to blow their mind.
Right.
Yeah. And within our community, I think another common denominator of all of the practices that we have are practices that are patient fanatics.
Yep.
And it works itself out in different ways. The way that the practice looks and feels could be different. But what is common is all of these successful partners in our community are absolutely fanatical about patient care. And that's the medicine, and that's the hearts and minds of every single one of the people that come in. And you can see it through the team, up and down.
Yep.
They just love on every single person that walks through that door.
Yep. Definitely need to be patient-centered.
That's right. So Doc, why in a world where you could have picked a lot of different people, what got you excited about MODIS? Got you excited enough to join us?
So I was looking for an exit strategy a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been working with someone who was looking to be an associate.
Yeah.
It didn't work out. And I have a friend of mine who is in my residency with me. He practices in Las Vegas, and he had just signed on with another DSO.
Yep.
And he said, I look at it. And they do a lot of advertising in the Periodontal Journal, and they attend the periodontal meeting. And my plan was to talk to them when the meeting occurred in the fall. And in the meantime, a few months prior to that, a gentleman who's a prosthodontist in South Florida that I did some educational programs with, he reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in talking to the Thurston Group? I said, well, sure, I'll be happy to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
And so that kind of led to another thing and led to another thing. And eventually I found out that Dr. Picos was going to be involved, a heavy player. And I've been one of his biggest fans all my career. I just think the world of Dr. Picos, what he's done for our industry. And so I really started liking my options with MODIS.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I had a long conversation with my wife and a long conversation on many nights with Marcus and yourself, and really just felt really, really comfortable with my decision to join MODIS. So and really, really happy with that decision so far.
You took my next question from me. I was going to say, what's your experience been like?
I mean, it hasn't been smooth sailing from day one, but it's been a good experience. We're getting all the bugs worked out, and hopefully before too long, it'll be up and running and gelling and, where we want it to be.
Yep. And how about for your team?
They love it. They absolutely love it.
Yeah.
They had concerns initially because we have a couple of individuals who have worked in previous offices that were part of DSOs. Yeah. And the culture was a lot different than the culture of MODIS. Yep. So they're extremely excited about opportunities going forward as well. And so everybody's happy.
Yeah. You have some very talented team members. That's good to hear. And last question that I have, and then I'll also give you the floor too. But the last question that I have is, what gives you energy about the future as partners?
So what gives me energy is the potential opportunities for growth in areas that will help our patients and our staff. I just can see so many things happening that we couldn't do before because of our size and our resources available. And so I'm excited for those opportunities.
Yeah, likewise. Really, that's one of our foundational bedrocks is partnering with people that see and are aligned with that vision that we have. There's the aspect of continuing education through the Institute, but it's really just a mindset of growth and people that are excited about that opportunity, not just for themselves, but for their team. We have one of Dr. Picos's former practice manager, Allison. She's now our director of integrations, and it's those growth stories as well that matter, and for the partners in our community, get them excited because they think about their family, they think about the opportunities that they could have as part of a growing platform, and it's exciting. And it's exciting to be on this journey with you. Yeah. So, absolutely. David, last is not even a question. Just give you the floor if there's anything that you would want to share with a person that might be in your shoes, kind of considering partnering with anyone, and maybe more specifically partnering with MODIS, what would you share with them if they were listening?
I think that the most important thing that you can do is to reach out to someone who is already part of the organization.
Yeah.
Find out what their experience was like, what their experience is now. And that way you'll have a little bit more comfortable approach to making your decision. Obviously, there's the chance that you guys might cherry pick and only give referrals that are having a great experience. But in all honesty, everybody that I talked to just was emphatic about how great the experience has been working with MODIS. And so I think that if that joining a DSO is going to be part of your exit strategy, then you really need to give MODIS a hard look. So they're wonderful people to work with. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And thanks for your time.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Community Conversations. This podcast is powered by MODIS Dental Partners, an organization dedicated to supporting dental professionals with cutting-edge technology and continuing education opportunities through the PICOS Institute. If you enjoyed what you heard, follow Community Conversations wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.